Okay, welcome to another episode of Panakal podcast for Geeks, the show about good friends hanging out, talking about the things we love. My guest today is Winona Nelson, and you guys all know Andrew Sides, my co-host. I guess we're going to do an artist interview first. So, how's it going, Winona? I'm going to call you Noni because that's the only way I know. It's hard for me to say Winona over and over. That's screwing it up. So, I was going to actually start by talking about, you just moved recently and you sent me a bunch of photos about with your cool house.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned it was built in like 1840?
Yep, 1840.
Oh.
Nice old building. It's in
I'm
a pretty
gonna call you
rural
Noni.
part of Pennsylvania. So not in the woods proper, but pretty much on the border of them.
Do you have like your own like plot of land? Like, is your closest neighbor like a mile down the street?
No, they're actually pretty close. So
Oh.
I'm in a tiny little unincorporated town of 500 people. But I do have a really nice yard. Like, it's already landscaped.
It's
So
tiny.
I'm in it's
Nice.
so nice.
That's cool, man. I mean,
Can you hear my cat meowing?
No.
Not yet.
The kids yelling in the
Yeah, here's the perks of doing a show live. You can hear all sorts of weird noises, and as long as a car doesn't go crashing through your window, I think we're all good.
with a house that old, are there weird architectural quirks to it and stuff? Like the oldest house I think I've lived in was one from 1940, and at the time, like, I only had like plaster walls that I had to deal with, which is like different than drywall and stuff. I'm not sure how many weird proclivities from an 1840 house is still in modern day times.
Yeah, well, we can definitely tell that, like, there's a second half bathroom in the downstairs that was just added into the middle of what used to be like a hallway that went through the center of the house. And the floor plan is kind of confusing. So, like,
That's interesting.
For the first couple weeks we lived here, we kept on going the wrong way trying to get to the stairs. So we took the long way around every time. Yeah, they're just kind of in a funny place.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but the previous owners were like really meticulous with updating it, but keeping the old characters. So, like, it's all
nice.
In really beautiful condition and has a lot of original wood and stuff like that.
Except that workout room with the fancy.
Yeah.
What is that? A chandelier you sent me?
Yeah, it's got like a crystal like light fixture.
It looks like it's straight out of like the 80s or 90s, you know, like this fancy, like it's the only thing I think doesn't really fit with the rest of the house from what I could tell.
Yeah, I think that room was like made over the most recently, and we decided to make it a workout room because it had like a linoleum floor that could get beat up. So
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah,
you just work out in style.
Yeah, that's right. When we bring over our dumbbells, we're gonna spray paint them gold too.
That's
we're
right.
Still in the process of moving stuff from the old house.
That's cool. Does it feel haunted? I have to ask.
It definitely makes sounds, but it doesn't feel scary. It feels like very, very like positive energy. But when there's wind, there's like parts of the house that whistle and kind of howl a little bit. But it doesn't sound scary. It sounds cozy. See, especially since we put up a wind chime. So now, like, when the weather's bad, it just sounds really nice.
See, that's kind of. I always like. So we looked at a bunch of we didn't look at one that old. I think the oldest house we looked at was 1912, and even that was an old farmhouse that people did an immaculate job of taking care of this house. But you know, when we looked at the guts of it, it's like a lot of old pipes and stuff that would need to be changed, and the math was just like, this is going to be expensive for Chicago. Okay, so
right.
And I was like, I like this house, but also, like, when you stepped outside, the backyard was awesome because it was by this creek, and I thought, this is cool. But the front was, the people around this house just were like, the guy across the street had a junkyard, basically. His whole front lawn looked like the junkyard from the Sandlot, you know? And I was like, I don't think I want to live across from that. But the house gave me this weird vibe too, like something's here. Didn't feel like it was gonna like kill me, but I was like, something's happening in this house. It's an old house.
I think it's important to pay attention to the vibes. We saw like the other houses when we went to see this one, and neither of them felt nearly as like
welcoming,
cheerful.
Yeah.
This one just felt good to be in, and the previous two people who owned it each raised kids here, so like they were like long-term residents.
Owners and all
that. Yeah. That's how. So it was like well loved.
Yeah, this house was like the people had 2 kids, and then when they moved out, they remodeled a bunch of stuff. But we talked to the mother, the woman of the house, and she was saying how she insisted on putting a tub in one of the bathrooms because whoever moves here next is probably gonna have kids too. The husband wanted to put standing showers everywhere because he was just like, it's just us 2. Let's just put standing showers in all the bathrooms. Like, why wouldn't you want at least one?
The tub was one of my make or break things looking for house because I love taking baths.
Yeah, people like. I'm like, does this dude never like take a bath? Does he only take showers? It's just weird. He was a weird dude. Once I saw him and talked to him, I was like, yeah. He also has done. It's a lot
harder to have a candle in the shower.
Yeah, but it's really easy to have a shower beer. So,
you can have a bath beer too, though.
I mean, this guy did all sorts of weird like wiring, and so like, are you finding like you said they like remodeled it a little bit, right? So I found with these older houses, like there's a lot of like rigs, for lack of a better word, right? Like when we were trying to trace the lines on the power, like he ran all the switches in this one room to the light above the closet door, which is like the weirdest place to fucking put it. And my electrician was like, this is weird. It's not the way to do these things. But he cleaned it all up for me. But I was like, is it a fire hazard? He's like, no, it's just not the way to do it. It makes it harder when you have to.
My house was.
Yeah. So, and Andrew knows about the cat. The people that lived here ran no Cat 5 for internet, but he ran a shit ton of coax everywhere. And I was just like, why? Did you have a TV in every room of the house? But we're going to talk a little bit about Noni here. That's why she's on. We're talking about houses. I don't know how it felt.
Yeah, I mean, new homeowner thing. It's like you get obsessed.
It's almost impossible not to find something wrong with a house. Even if you buy I have friends who literally built a house from the ground up, and then a year later they're like, this thing broke. This thing's
something either like nags in the back of your head or just unexpectedly breaks.
Yeah. So I was going to talk about you doing work for Magic first, because I think that's kind of cool. That obviously it's a jumping point that people are going to recognize you for. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you like got into Magic, and do you still do stuff for Magic?
Yeah.
So Magic was like one of those things that made me realize that art could even be a job that paid money when I was a kid. My parents were both artists, but they never made a living at it. So I was only aware of like a little bit about how the gallery world was, and that it didn't really exist in Duluth, Minnesota. So I kind of was watching out for ways to make money from art, even from when I was a little kid, because I wanted to, be able to afford food and things. And when I saw Magic cards, I was like really, really swept away by the art. The art was so cool and so different on each card, and it had the names of the artists on it, and I was like taking note of how many different names there were on there, and I was like thinking that was probably a job that somebody made money doing. So that was like one of my goals, that and doing artwork for video games. Similarly, I saw the artwork in the little booklets that came with PlayStation 1 was the first game system that my older brother bought. And there were like colored pencil character drawings in the booklet for Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
I could do that. I could do that for a job. And I didn't have any idea how to approach either of those, but I just kind of started trying to make artwork that looked like those things, and was just like obsessed with fantasy and drawing characters. And then as I found more communities popping up on the internet, as the internet grew into a bigger and bigger thing, I kind of grew up alongside the internet. And by the time the old artwork forum called conceptart.org came around, I was already working a little bit in comic books. But once I saw like what a professional artist's portfolio looked like, and people were discussing things like what you needed in a portfolio and how to share it, and finding out about workshops and conventions and things from that site was kind of like the breakthrough for me to figure out how to get my work seen by people who could hire for those things. So then through going to workshops, I ended up meeting Jeremy Jarvis, who was the art director for Magic the Gathering at the time. And I showed him my portfolio. I had been working as a character designer for video games at that point for a couple years. And when he looked at my portfolio, he said that I was a character designer, not an illustrator. So it's like, okay, what's the difference? And he told me that I needed to draw backgrounds. So I was like, okay. And then I met him at another workshop like 2 months later and had added backgrounds to all my character designs. And he was like, yeah, they need to not be shitty though. Like, you have to do a good job at them. And so I asked him like what kinds of things he looked for, and he told me that like something that supported the narrative, that like gave you a clue to who the character is and what the story was. And I was like, okay, noted. So like I really benefited from like being able to meet him face to face, so I could ask him questions and be like kind of pushy about it. But he helped me so much with giving me feedback. And I think like the process, I ended up meeting him like 4 different times before he saw enough things in my portfolio to like feel like he could take a chance on me. And he ended up having a card description that he said he couldn't trust his stable of straight male artists to approach, because they wanted a character that would appeal to women and gay men. And so my first magic card assignment was for a shirtless vampire dude, which was awesome because that's like so my comfort zone.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, it was just like a series of like meeting first other people who were doing that work as a job, and then meeting the art director. He was a guest instructor at the illustration master class. So that was at a workshop the first time that I met him.
I think it's important that like having that opportunity. I think that's like a LuxCon for me in Spectrum when it was around. Is going to those events, not to say try to sell stuff and make money, but to go to those events and do exactly what you did, which is approach people that you know, artists that you respect and want to learn from, and face to face ask them those questions, because you get that real, like, you know, it's like your backgrounds are shitty. You get that real response versus the canned, like an email where they're like, hey, keep working on this, you know. I've had several of those conversations where
most art directors, if they're not ready to hire you, won't reply to an email anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you won't get that feedback step.
Yeah, so like I've gotten some of those harsh reviews where I'm just like, it took a couple of those before I was just like, they're not meaning to be mean, they're meaning to push you in a specific direction, you know.
Just tough love.
Every time that cat walks into the room, it looks like it's doing the exact same thing. So it looks like the Matrix is resetting each time.
Yeah, that's Diego. He'll walk past in the background a lot, I think.
It's just like both times he's come in, he looked exactly the same to me, and I'm just like, uh-oh. But
it's a glitch.
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, you know, people come to LuxCon and they don't bring like their portfolios with because they're you know, afraid to talk to. It doesn't even have to be an art director, right? There's like take the main show. So my first LuxCon, I went into the main show and I approached each artist that I liked, and I was just like, hey, can I get a portfolio review from you, right? And I just went down the line. If they said no, I was like, cool. You know, if they said yes, I would be like, can I come back, or can you do it now? Kind of learned a lot doing that, and I don't think my art's magic ready, but I do feel like I've learned a ton in the last 6 years or so.
Yeah, and if you can do that and also like say what your goals are out loud, I think that's something that a lot of people are afraid to do.
Yeah.
But like if you are showing your portfolio to somebody and you don't also have the step of telling them what your goals are, what you hope to do, then sometimes the advice that they give might not help you. It might not be taking
it won't
you
push you in the right direction.
Yeah,
I had that with I was telling I think Andrew this story about I took Scott Fisher's Smart School class last term, and he had Richard Witters on, and Richard was like asking everyone the same question. He was like, "What's your goal? What do you want from this?" And I was like, "I don't really want to be a D&D artist or a magic artist per se. I would love to work on a magic card. That would be awesome." Now, younger me was like,
primary thing.
Yeah, my primary thing is my own series right now. But if he had asked me that question, say 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I probably would have been like, I want to work for magic. That's what I want to do. Because that's that drive everybody has when they start, I think. Not saying I hate magic or anything like that. So anyone watching, don't misremember.
Well, Magic has really been expanding the types of voices that they'll put on cards too. So like it's not at all uncommon for them to hire people with a visual style that wouldn't.
I'm still trying. Don't get me wrong.
They've expanded it.
Yeah, I'm still trying. I'm actually trying to. I'm talking to Tom about Secret Lair stuff. Hopefully soon. But Bruce had a question. He said, "Do you remember any specific changes you made in response to any of those reviews?" For me, and from the top of my head, what I can remember is I definitely changed a lot of my style, like because early on I was doing a lot of basic shapes, and I even tried using the Photoshop poster filter to get the shapes I wanted to get started to make some of these characters and stuff. And then I took Scott's class. I took a lot of advice from different people at those shows who were basically telling me how to one thing I had to do is learn anatomy more. Basic anatomy was lost because I was so used to doing graffiti, which is just very straight edge designs, right? It's like if it looks like an arm, it's an arm. If it looks like a leg, it's a leg. It never was like defined, I guess. But after I took Scott's class, he was like, "You've got this cool style. You're using lasso a lot, but it's hard to sell the style to people because people say, oh, there's a filter for everything." Sure. And then he was like, he's like, "You can use a filter for anything you want." And he himself showed us some of his process, which use a ton of filters, right? And then he does a process. He taught me a thing called jack it up, which is basically go in there and draw over everything over and over. So it looks so different from what you got from just the filter. And I think that's where my style really started popping forward a little bit. I don't know if that answered your question, Bruce. I hope it does. But I also want to talk about, you're working on a graphic novel that you mentioned to us. And you have done a lot of stuff did you do a Sandman comic book?
No, I haven't really done all that many comics projects. I did one called Artifice.
Okay.
That was one of my first jobs. And that was like a gay science fiction action romance comic.
Were you mostly covers or all? Or
no,
like
that was
covers
that
and
was
interiors?
covers and interiors for that. It was for a graphic novel for someone who was self-publishing.
Do you not do a lot of comics because they're stressful? Because I found my friend once asked me to do an 8-page comic for his wife. And after page 1, I was like, I never want to do this again.
Well, it's a totally different mindset. Like you have to be able to relate to the project as a storytelling project and not as illustration. Because if you try to make every panel an illustration, it's going to be a nightmare, and it's going to be a much worse comic.
I feel like that's like an Alex Ross move, right? Like each of his, he's like every panel is like he's put everything into it. I'm like, how has this man not lost his mind? But
he's also, I'm trying to think, like he works like what, interiors, I think, twice a year at most, something like that. He doesn't do a lot of interiors nowadays.
But I mean, like, when he did Kingdom Come
back
and
in the
stuff,
day,
I was like, this is a lot of highly detailed. Whatever. We're not talking about Alex. So
yeah, no. Yeah, I've always wondered the same thing with Paulo Rivera. He works a lot in gouache though and stuff. Like I remember he started in oil and like I think he did one comic entirely in oil and he's like, this is a fucking nightmare. I have to change this around. This doesn't work for me. Yeah, no, it's when I used to work in the medium, it's totally the whole mechanism of the entire medium just forces you to be like, okay, how do you pare this down? How do you pare this down? How do you make it still as simple as it can be for you so you don't lose your brain while still being true to yourself in terms of how it looks and like how you want it to feel and everything.
So that's a good question for Noni. What medium are you using on your graphic novel?
I'm using graphite powder, graphite and digital watercolor. So it's there's no inking stage for me, but I'm using the graphite powder basically as if it were an ink wash.
So the digital watercolor, are you doing like Clip Studio or something?
No, Photoshop.
Oh, in Photoshop? Oh, you get a watercolor? Okay.
Yeah, I'm using like the Kyle Webster watercolor.
Oh yeah.
There's some pretty good ones in there.
Yeah, he's got some good brushes. I think I'm so used to just lasso and fill, and I do a lot.
Yeah,
now.
For anyone who wants to see a little bit of what the artwork looks like, if you just go on my Twitter, I think I still have a pinned little teaser for it.
Is it the one at the very top? No. Let's see.
I don't remember what I have at my very top.
Oh gosh, you playing Wordle too?
It is. It's for the pinned tweet at the top. So it's got a little short description and then the cover and 2 of the interior pages.
Oh, this is cool.
Yeah, so it's like kind of a queer rock and roll ghost story, and
oh, okay, nice.
It's been my my obsession since like just before the pandemic started. I started a short story, and then during all the isolation and some difficult stuff that I was going through, I poured it all into this comic. I lost my father right at the beginning of 2020. And so the fact that I had started writing a ghost story and then my relationship with death and grief just went through this drastic change where I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I needed to work out my feelings by turning it into something and basically just like mining these emotions I was having, particularly just at like this rage that we ever have to die, and like the tragedy that when someone dies, there's so much that's left unsaid. And so it was kind of like the story morphed into like what if there was a chance to kind of like tie everything up after you pass, if there's a way to like heal yourself so that you can move on. So that's kind of the inspiration for that story.
I mean, that's sorry for your loss. It's great that you can like put all that into you can like really grasp those feelings and put them in a comic book. I think I'd have a really hard time doing that.
Yeah, I think because I've already spent like my whole career putting really intensely personal emotions into my work, it kind of has become a really sort of useful therapy for me.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's kind of a nice outlet, right? Where I think I don't do that. I think a younger version of me might have like put something on a wall to rage out, but current me, it's like there's nothing in my work that feels. This sounds dumb when I say it, but it doesn't feel anything. I feel happy when I'm drawing, but I don't feel like I'm putting a piece of me into any of the artwork. Really, I feel like
well, I mean, there's cool. So many ways of using artwork as a therapeutic tool, and just like connecting to your joy is one of them. It's not any less authentic.
This is true. Yeah, my artwork make me feel like a kid. What was that now?
I said I paint a lot of pegacorns, and that's like also personal, but very different.
Dude, I never even thought of the word pegacorn. My kid was asking me about this the other day, and I was like, it's a Pegasus. And she was like, what if it has a horn? I was like, I don't know, it's a unicorn. And I'm dumb for not thinking pegacorn.
It's like I think pegacorn is something. Some people get mad at that combination because they're like from one of the words is Greek and the other is Latin or something like that.
Well, she has a My Little Pony that's clearly a pegacorn. So.
Yeah, I think My Little Pony calls them alicorns.
Oh, really?
So now you know. Yeah, it's an alicorn in My Little Pony.
Where do they get alicorn from?
Ale is like the prefix meaning winged.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, okay.
So Pegasus is like an actual character, not like a species.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. But it's so simple. People know what you mean when you say something like pega tiger or pega leopard, you know?
Right.
Or if you say ale, whatever, it's not going to be as obvious to somebody who's never thought of combining those words.
Well, now we've got a good lesson happening here. I never would have guessed that because she has because she'll ask, she asks a ton of, she's a kid, so she doesn't ask a ton of questions, but the unicorn and the Pegasus, I was like, Pegasus is a word she's never heard. So I was like, Pegasus. And then, my cousin was like, it's a My Little Pony, man. Like, she's not going to remember the word Pegasus. Just call it a unicorn. But I'm like, but it's got wings, dude. So it's like trying to teach her right. But alicorn is something I've never heard. So I'll have to remember that for next
time. Yeah, I haven't heard that either. That's fascinating.
So
learn something new with My Little Pony.
Yeah, of all things for me to learn today. That's what I'm taking with me. So you also mentioned, I think this book is going to be 300 pages.
Yeah, it's going to be a long time before this is going to be ready for anyone to purchase it. Right now I'm at the stage where the script is finished and I'm shopping it around to agents.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you next. If you're going to crowdfund it or.
Yeah, I want to avoid that if possible. I'd like to just go like the traditional book publisher route.
I feel like that's a good route because they'll then move the material for you. I'm still sitting on like 600 books out of 1,000, right? So I sold 400, which is not bad.
Well, I already know that I'm not really that reliable at things like fulfilling print orders when people buy things from my website, even though like I enjoy doing it, but it's just one of those things that's like it becomes a chore that's difficult to fit in with all the other things that I do.
Yeah,
repetitive.
It's a job into itself. The whole, like handling the scale of that. Yeah,
right, and being the salesperson.
Yeah, for the comics. Actually, I was wondering because you showed an example of what one of the I think it was one of the panels earlier, like before we hopped on the call.
Yeah, but right here's like before the colors. This is what it looks like in pencil.
Yeah, so I was actually wondering, like, are you doing all the panels separately and then you're just compositing them together within Photoshop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm drawing them like at the size that the panel is, for it to be like put together into a traditionally sized like 10-inch by 15-inch page.
I honestly think like that's a good way to do it. It's a smart way to go about it nowadays. Like I used to do it where like the traditional way where you had the whole panel thing, and like I hated that so much. And I never got around to trying to do the separate thing, but it always made more sense to me.
Yeah, the page will get so messy. I'm like a little bit OCD about getting stuff on my hands, which when you're working with graphite, I'm using 9B pencils, so they're really soft, and then like graphite powder. And so like I'm constantly getting up and washing my hands and stuff. And if this was all on one page, like it would have smears everywhere, and would be like
you gotta get some of those like tattoo gloves. The real tight ones.
I've tried those. It's just so much easier to have them on. There's multiple reasons, because also like if you fuck up a face and you need to just start over on the panel, you're not throwing out the whole page.
Sure. So. It also lets you like make sure that the scale of the mark making works for the panel, because like if you had a panel like that, whatever, you wanted to keep it all that kind of size, you're looking at like an 18 by 24, even larger, full size comic page, just to have everything in scale.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like the usual comic pages are like 11 by 17, if I remember right. So panels are usually
Well, the
like
outer
3 inches or so.
border is usually 11 by 17 with like a 10 by 15 live area. And I am drawing it at size for a 10 by 15 inch live area.
That's cool.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to keep it loose and fast the way that I draw it, so that it feels like it goes with the kind of gritty nature of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I drew it larger, that would be actually making me get more precious with it, I think.
And everything would
like
look
put more unnecessary details.
Are you like finishing each page, then coloring each page, and then moving to the next page?
Yeah, I'm hopping around a little bit, but for the most part, just going forward with it.
I was curious to I feel like I don't know how I would handle that process. Like even when I did the book one last year, just putting that, and then my book's only like 50 pages, and I almost lost my damn mind putting that together. Luckily, I have a really good editor and good designer who did the layout, but I was like, this is a lot. Like now I'm doing book 2 by myself. I mean, I'm doing all the design and editing. Well, the editor I still got, but the designer, I'm not using the same designer anymore. So it's not easy. And are you using like InDesign or anything to lay it out?
No, all Photoshop. It's just because I've used Photoshop since I was like 13. So like,
so you'll just send those panels individually to whoever's going to print them.
No, I'm finishing the whole page myself. I'm doing the layouts, the letters, all of it, and it's all like interconnected. So like the panel borders change according to what's going on in the story, and it's part of the art. So
I was trying to figure out how you're laying out so like page 1 to page 2 is all in the same file.
No, page 1. Each individual page is on its own.
Got it.
But what I did was where's my notebook? I have like a printed out version of the layouts, which I guess I don't have upstairs here with me. But I printed out my script pages with little rectangles printed on it for doing the pages, and then I scan in those little layouts and put the pages that will be facing pages next to each other, so that I can see how they're working together. And then on top of those tiny little layout thumbnails, then I letter that, and then print out the layout sketches blown up to the size that they're going to be at. So like this is like the printout of the panel that I'm drawing now. And then I used Duralar, which is just like a plastic version of tracing paper, to do the panel drawing on top of that. And then this I tape to the back of a piece of moleskin paper and do the final drawing on top of that.
Oh, it's a process. That's going to be awesome when it's done.
Yeah, it's so fun.
I can see why you'd want somebody else to sell it when you're done. You're like...
Yeah,
I've also been informed that I'm sitting on 700 copies of my book, not 600. So that doesn't make me feel good at all. But
yeah, and also like I think it's gonna find its audience best if it's on bookstore shelves, as opposed to like a comic store. Like I want people to get the whole story all at once rather than a little bit at a time. Because it's a complicated story that deals with a lot of dark themes and a lot of difficult stuff. So if somebody gets like a little slice in the middle, if it were released as a series or just online, they could get a misinterpretation of where the story is going.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, it's good to give them all everything at once, especially like you can start working on the next book versus the next. Like I meant like the next like series or whatever versus book 2, almost one shots. I had a question, but I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. It's a big project, and I'm doing that on the side of all the other stuff.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah,
right.
So you're doing this on the side of all your like freelance work, I assume, and also you're an instructor at Smart School too, right? So.
Yep, we just wrapped up the winter semester, and spring semester starts in a couple.
Yep, I'm taking Scott again. No offense. I've thought about taking different instructors, but every time Scott and I just resonate, and I get so much out of his courses. It's just
finding somebody that you really vibe with is important.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Exactly. I've had a bunch of mentors, and Scott's the one that resonates the best with me. So it's just easy. Not easy, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. I had a question about the like the divvy of time between your comic work and then like doing all the other stuff. Like, so right now the comic work is kind of a smaller subset compared to everything else. Do you see that changing in the future? Like as you get further into it, like you're going to have to probably take more time for it, or do you think it'll just kind of stay like that until it gets to the finish line?
I'm planning to devote more time to it. Right now I have more clients than I try to keep at one time. So I'm doing world building stuff for Wizards of the Coast, and I'm doing concept art for Marvel Studios. Both of those I'm doing part-time. And then I also have like the children's book that I'm doing for Scholastic. So this is like too much work for me right now and like I'm still doing a little bit on my comic, but it's like a slow trickle. So ideally I would just have like 4 hours a day of client work. And that's what I was doing earlier on in the project, and was making much faster progress on my comic. So hopefully I'll be returning to that. The Marvel thing is going to be like probably a on and off per project kind of thing. So that will come and go, I think, is my expectation.
Marvel sounds cool, actually. World building sounds awesome. That's something I love doing, obviously. And then the Marvel stuff, it would be awesome to do some concept work for Marvel.
But... Yeah, it's cool because they're both kind of more of a combination of art and storytelling together. That's been really exciting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's all, I'm assuming it's all NDA as well. So
yeah, very.
That's I was talking to another artist last week, and they were like, "I have all this awesome work, but it's NDA, and no one's ever going to hear about it," And I'm like, that's kind of the nature of the beast, man. Like, you want to do this awesome thing for this awesome company, and you basically can't talk too much about it,
Yeah.
But
I did have my first children's book for Scholastic came out this past fall. It's called If You Live During the Plymouth Thanksgiving. And it's a historical educational children's book about how Thanksgiving came to be a holiday, basically, like what the actual history is.
I don't think I've seen that.
The native perspective also represented respectfully, so it gives as much time to the European side and the native side, which is really cool. And the children's book work actually was directly influenced by what I've been doing for the comic work. So I did that in a similar fashion with traditional graphite lines and then digital watercolor.
Well, that's cool. So, you were able to use that method everywhere else as well. Jonathan, are you asking about the children's book she just mentioned, or another one? There's a question about a children's book, but I missed it. Sorry. Oh, so you're busy, man. So that's I don't know. Like, at some point in my life, I'd like to be. I feel like I'm busy, but not busy enough with work, which is kind of like where you want to be, right? So that's kind of it's cool. Slightly jealous.
And you got your house moving on the top of it, so it's just everything. Everything's busy all the time right now.
Yeah, it's not as crazy as I've been at some points in previous eras of my life. Like, I'm a lot better at managing my time and knowing how long I take to do things. That's one of the things that I'm constantly telling my students to do, is like mark down how long you spend on every little thing, because knowing that is going to help you so much in the future.
Yeah, like write down how long it took you to finish each of your, like, I've been writing down because people always ask me at show, how long did it take you to do this illustration? I'd be like, well, that one took me like 3 weeks. And then sometimes I'll be like, well, that one took me like 3 months because I was still learning or I have a bad habit of tinkering with stuff. We all do. But
and if you keep track of it as hours rather than like from when you started it to when you finished it, like you get a more accurate presentation of like how long it'll actually take you.
Because I'm seeing that now with like I'm working on a project on the side with someone, and it's like I'm moving fast enough, but then I feel like, did I just spend too much time on this? Am I like, because if like you're only getting paid X and you're going over X, then you're losing money in the process, right?
But you never want to turn something in that isn't a good representation of your work either. So
correct.
It's important for you to know how many hours you need to bring it to that level.
Because that's what I had. I got called out by Mark Sheff online one day because I posted a thing saying sometimes you make art that you're okay with, sometimes you make art that you're really, really happy and love, and sometimes you just turn in the work because you're due for a deadline. And I'm working on a thing with him, but he was like, I see this on Twitter, by the way, Alan, and I appreciate you turning in the thing. I'm like, yeah, I didn't half-ass your thing, dude. I was like, I did yours correctly, but I really rushed another thing after I turned it in. I was like, I could have done better if I had allocated my time better. Like, it's very important to know that, if it's going to take you 3 hours to do a thing or a week, just be honest with it. Because sometimes I feel like people are like, I just want the job, so I'll do it faster.
Yeah. What you were saying about being honest, I think like that's super important to like to not be judgmental about it when you're keeping track of your times for things. Cause like I know that I'm somebody who like I when I'm working for somebody else, I need the pressure of the deadline to like get myself moving.
Yep.
And I tend to procrastinate otherwise, but it's not that I'm not like thinking about what I'm going to do for that job. And I've come to realize that like I need a lot of time of just like planning things in my head and making decisions. And then I need the time pressure to force me to move confidently. And the work turns out better when I don't have time to second guess it, unless I'm doing something really experimental, in which case I'll double my time estimate so that I have time to do it over again if I totally just bomb it.
That's a good method. Yeah, because go ahead, I'm sorry.
When you come to understand your own working rhythms, then you know how to like plan for like when you're gonna need to like just crash and rest for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Because you should be able to like work through your workflow without being stressed and pressured into like I gotta get this done. Like
you have to plan your resting time. It's just as important. It's more important than working time.
That was something that they were talking about in the Rusty Discord too. Like people were like, "What do you guys do during the day as you work?" And I'm like, for starters, take a nap. If you got an opportunity to take a nap, take one. But if you got a chance to take a walk, take a walk. I mean, I take a walk outside. Even if it's like if I'm like I can get 10 minutes in or 15 minutes in, I just do it. Because A, it's good for my back because I'm at a sit-stand desk all day. But B, get some fresh air, man, because it'll calm yourself down, get back to work later, I'm also really good at being like, this is stressing me out right now, I'm going to walk away from it. But, like you're saying, if you allocate your time accordingly, you won't feel so bad about walking away from it for a little bit. I think that's key.
Yeah, it's part of your process to like let things percolate and like
like they don't need to know when you say this is going to take me 10 hours. They don't need to know that you've calculated in like 3 naps in there, or whatever.
I think it's such a hard lesson to learn, especially for people that come from like 9-to-5 jobs, because in that context, there's no one ever expects any kind of downtime, and no one, especially for artists, they're like, no, we don't. What do you mean you have to walk away from this or whatever? You have to like do something else and whittle on it. It's like, no, we need you to just keep pumping stuff out, and that's all they really care about. And no, it like things go so much easier when you can stop and like take a break, like step away from it for a few minutes or whatever you need to do it.
I mean, I've had a client.
Clients don't need to know what you're doing every moment of your day.
Oh yeah,
you just tell them when you're going to turn the thing in and then do that.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't need to play by play, I guess. I've had a client once who moved my deadline up Like I had a deadline of
it happens
X, and they moved it
sometimes.
up like a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I was like, oh. And I feel like if I was a little more comfortable with my workflow, I would have been like, yeah, that's fine. We're good. I'll get it done. But I literally had to email them and be like,
with enough notice maybe,
yeah,
but usually when clients ask you to move a deadline up, like they know that's a big ask and you can
yeah.
say no.
So I'm gonna take us away from this topic a little bit.
Okay.
But Jonathan's question was, are you working on a new children's book that you're allowed to talk about, or?
I am working on a new children's book. It's another historical one for Scholastic, and I'm not sure
cool.
what I can say about it
It's all good.
otherwise. But
dude, every time I hear Scholastic, it reminds me of when I was in grade school and
the book fair.
The book fair, man. You like live for those things, right? And I remember my dad. My dad is like an Indian man. Like he does not want to spend money on all that extra fluff, right? So like he would do this thing to me where I'd fill out that list, and then he would act like he was gonna go buy all those books, and then sometimes one book showed up, and I'd be like, I gave you like 7 books, man. But I guess I should be happy I got one book out of it, right? But I remember anytime those Scholastic fairs came out, this is brilliant. This is such a good idea. And then
I do book covers for another division of Scholastic too. I've been doing this series of horse girl book covers, like about a girl's horse ranch and like her horses and things, and like I just love working on that stuff because it's so within my comfort zone that like drawing and painting horses is just like a joy where I never have to question it. I never have to be like, am I doing a good job? I'm just like, I love horses.
See, man, I can't.
Can I draw another horse for money, please?
I'm trying to work. Andrew knows this. He's been looking at this centaur I've been working on, and I was like, horses are. I can't even get it to look right in my style, let alone, like I finally kind of got it somewhere towards the end because, do you know Claire McHenry? Claire loves drawing horses, so she was like, show me what you want to draw, and then what she did was she took my drawing and then she drew a skeletal system into it for me. I sent her the sketch of the horse I started, and then she was like, here's the joints you missed in the leg. Like I drew the legs like human legs basically with only 2 joints versus like a 3rd joint and all that jazz. But once she did that, it got a little. I'm not gonna say horses are easy to draw for me because they're just not. But also I don't draw horses all day, right? So it's not like apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. There's I don't know who said it, but there's a quote that somebody said about like not discounting something that you do just because it comes easy to you. Like those things sometimes are really hard for others. And like horses are one of those things for me that they're so easy that it just feels like I'm flying when I'm drawing horses.
That's cool, man.
to be getting paid to draw horses, it makes me feel like because there's no struggle that like maybe I'm not doing as good a job or something, but then I look at the horse and I'm like, no, this horse is good. Like I can do really, really good horses. So it's actually like really freeing because it's the one subject matter that I don't have to be like, is this an idea people will respect me for? Like what will people think about me because of how I did this horse? There's nothing like that. It's just like horses are pretty. This is a pretty horse.
I feel like that's how you should be feeling when you draw something you really love, right?
Yeah. Versus well, I mean, when I draw the comic, it's like scary the whole time in a way, but also like really freeing because it is so personal that like and it does deal with like things that a lot of other people know a lot about, like punk rock and guitars and things like that I need to draw correctly. So it's a different challenge, but it is also like really like at this point I have a lot of experience just drawing things that are difficult for me. So I have a system for it. I know what the steps are. I know how it feels. It's kind of a thing that like when you've been working long enough, things don't just get easier, but you get more comfortable with the difficulty. It just becomes like a natural part of the thing. You're like, all right, this is the part that sucks where I feel terrible. and like I know that that's a temporary thing. I've never had something. It's really, really rare that something just won't work out when I like apply myself in the steps that I know to do. Like
that's like when I
reference
is what I was gonna say. That's with like so when I took Scott's class, I didn't take any courses for a number of years because in my head I was like, you kind of have your own style. You're doing landscapes, you're fine. But I sat in on audited his D&D character design course. And in my head, I was like, okay, all these students learned a ton about anatomy and drawing characters from this course. So I messaged him to be like, I want to take the course, but I don't want to draw. I have no interest in drawing D&D characters. I'll draw fantasy characters, but they have to live in my world. They have to be part of my series because I want to make a piece of art that I can use later too, right? So, the first thing he had us all do is like, he had me look up reference and they had us do a bunch of sketches. And I realized the sketching phase is that phase for me where I'm just like, I fucking hate everything about this sketch. And then Andrew helped me pose a 3D model of the sketch. Right, remember that? The dude, he's like standing there with a sword on his back. And then even that model, the model looked better than my sketch. So I was like, I'm just going to trace over the model real quick to get the shapes and the angles right. I got all of it fine. And then I took it to Scott and we looked at it. And even then I was still looking at the sketch like, I hate my sketches, But then Scott's like, you've done the hard part, which is getting your angles and perspectives down. He's like, now all you have to do is bring your shapes and put them on top of this guy. And at first I was like, it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to look that good. And then I started putting the shapes in and I was like, oh, it's fucking right. Like go figure. He knows what he's talking about, And the more I kept like not allowing that step to slow me down and just push through the shit to get to the cool stuff, which the fun stuff, right? Which is my shapes and my colors. And that piece turned out, I'm going to announce it on Monday. Because Aaron Miller is going to make a magic token out of it for me for his Patreon and stuff. So I was like, It turned out amazing to me. And I haven't been able to recreate that magic too many times. The centaur's killing me, but I'll get it. I think I just gotta.
You start to get attached to that painful part of it too. It's sort of like exercise where like, when you exercise at first it's painful and like annoying and you hate it, but then like when you start to see some of the results that you get from it, you become so much more motivated, and as your results keep building on top of your previous work, it gets more and more exciting to the point that like at some point that you wind up with like you have your favorite exercise and you get all excited when it's push-up day because like that you get really big gains on push-up day and like you look different the next day and you get to like flex and see what you've done. And like art is the same way, that like as those skills build up, it becomes like when you go through the really difficult part, you're like, I know that the end result is going to be something amazing because this part is as hard as it is.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting from, like I did 3.5 pieces technically in his class, but I had to get through that first one to be like, you're going to be fine. Also, you obviously enjoy push-ups more than I do.
Push-ups and abs. I do push-ups and abs on one day, and I love it. That's my favorite work.
Oh, man. Push-ups, lifting is not my jam. I still do it, but it's not. There's a couple comments here. So let's see. Sasha said, comfort zone art is interesting. I'm in a space right now where that's all I want to do, but there's a guilt there. Like, should I be doing human figures so I'll be taken more seriously, right? It's not true, I don't think, man. You should be drawing whatever you want to draw.
I was going to say, if it's getting you what you want out of your stuff, then I don't think you should have too much guilt towards it, I get I would say like if you feel like you're hitting, if you feel like there's definite like glass ceiling kind of thing to it where you feel like you can see beyond where you need to go, but you feel like you're hitting a limit, that's probably when you would have to question it. But if you're vibing in it, then
his follow-up statement was your problem. Sort of torn between trying to meet my own current standards and goals versus striving after what my peers or others might value as industry relevant.
That's the thing that I see people having that conflict, that internal conflict a lot, and it's something that that my students have a lot, and it's something that I know I've had that fear before too, of like, if it's something that is so personal, how is it going to have any relevancy to anyone else? And I've found that the more intensely personal I make things, the more other people connect to it, and the more it becomes something that other people wouldn't have done too, so it stands out as unique. And just on the topic of comfort zones, like I started with my students, I call it the power zone, and I talk about like growing your power zone, but like instead of calling it the comfort zone, it's like it's not shameful to do stuff that you enjoy. Like our culture is so weird that that it teaches you that if you're enjoying it, that means it's like not worthwhile. That like it's got to be painful to be important. And that's not true at all. Like painful work is important, but so is joyful work.
Yeah. That is a good way of saying it.
I like that reframing of it to call it a power zone instead of a comfort zone. I think that's a way better way to think of it.
Yeah, and you can expand your power zone and make it stronger and bigger. And like that just sounds cooler than like getting more comfortable. That sounds like settling.
Yeah.
I should move my auditing class over to you now. Like I feel like I might get these golden nuggets. That's actually a good way of looking at, I think, more students, like even myself included, because that's actually really a good way of looking at things, right? Because you fall into the trap of like, my earlier pieces, people were always like, you need to render it more because that's the industry standard, right? You got to like look like everything else. And I've had multiple people tell me they like the first version. I had done an older, more shapely version of my title character, but then I rendered him out. He still looks good, but I spent a lot of time rendering him out because in my head I was like, it has to look better because otherwise I'm not going to be able to. Also, I wanted to get work in the industry. So I was like, if you want to get work in the industry, you need to meet these industry standards. And then once I embraced the fact that I don't really care because like I enjoy my process now. I enjoy creating the artwork the way I make it. And people like it, when I bring it to the shows and stuff and people see it, they either like it or they hate it. Or, there's also that weird in between where they're like, we don't know what to do with this. And it's like, that's cool, man. You ain't got to do nothing with it. Just don't tell me you hate it because I don't want to hear that out loud, but keep walking. If it's not for you, just keep walking, man. We're all good. I made the art. I'm happy with it, right? Like I have that nervous feeling, I think, before every single show I do where it's like, you're either going to do really well here and people are going to love it or people are going to just not give a shit about it, right? And it always usually goes towards a positive. But that feeling, I don't, it's hard to like. The power zone idea I like because it's a cool way to think about it, but it's also a feeling that you got to like embrace and get used to it, I think. Like it took me a number of years to like, I still remember like my first Dragon Con, like Sasha, who's in the chat here, was my roommate, and that was my first time at Dragon Con. We were roommates, and I remember setting up, looking around that art show thinking, why the fuck are you here? Like, you do not belong at this show. Like, everything in here is so much better than anything you've got on your table. Like, I literally talked myself down in bed that night, and I was like so nervous going to bed. And then at the end of the show, I sold like everything. I think I came back home with like 3 playmats. So I went the opposite way of what I was thinking, right? But had I just walked in there saying,
looks different, that's a superpower. If your work looks different, it stands out. I think
it's a
misconception that people have that that you need to look like the other people in your industry. Your work needs to look like the other work in your industry in order for you to get work.
Correct.
That's really true. There are clients who need artists that can do like particular styles, and if you don't like working in that style, you're not going to like working for that client, so you shouldn't be shooting for that work anyway.
Right. Yeah, just do your own stuff, man, and the people that want to find you will find you. It's
Yeah, it's a longer term kind of career goal to follow your own voice and your own look like that, rather than trying to specifically tailor your work to a particular client. But I think it's like it's more sustainable in the long run. It's more fulfilling for you emotionally, and it makes you someone who's going to be sought out for the thing that you do. And specifically calling it your power zone, I think, really helps, because it makes it so that even in your own mind, if somebody were to ask you like, what should I hire you for? You could be like, well, here's my power zone. And like,
yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Say what you're good at. Like
Yeah.
people need to be able to say what they're good at, because a lot of the time art directors, like they have a very small amount of time to dedicate to each of the portfolios they're looking at. And when they look at your work and they ask you like, so what do you want to do? Like if you already know your power zone, you can just be like, well, the thing that I'm best at is this. And that's always a way better way of framing your work than to say like, well, I know I need some work on this thing and like I'm not as strong here, but
Right.
that
That's a
doesn't
good,
sell your work. That doesn't give someone
confidence.
in
Yeah. That's good advice, man. Yeah, I've had people reach out to me at one board game company, asked me to do a board game based on all animals, and I was like, no. And they were like, really? And I was like, yeah, man, there's 0 animals in my portfolio. Like, what makes you think I can draw animals? I was like, I'm
got a good
primarily
feeling about you and horses, Alan.
Yeah, exactly. You just went through they wanted me to draw like lions and shit, and I was like, it's gonna look janky, man. You don't want to. I literally was like, you don't want to hire me. But I recommended like 3 of my other friends. I was like, here's people that actually draw animals. Like, these are the people you want. You know, I'm like, but if you need like a crazy 80s style landscape done, I got you. You know, but I'm not gonna work on a zoo game, man. I really like them too. It's like I would have loved to work with them, but I was like, that's gonna look bad. I'm just trying to catch up in the thread here. Shen's gonna watch later. Cool. Sasha said those are good points. I think part of my position is that I gained traction and was recognized in the fantasy art community originally for a very specific set of work, but that set of work is just not where I am right now. But there's no reason to feel married to that just because it's what I was originally recognized. That's true. Yeah, don't be married to it.
That's like I remember hearing this apocryphal story from a landscape painter called Stapleton Kearns, and he talked about how, you know, as an artist, you really want to make sure you do your own thing, because otherwise you end up just hating the thing you do. You could be really good at it, but if your heart's really not into it, it's going to eventually show, or eventually it's just going to rub you raw. And what he talked about was he knew an artist that was chasing trends and started painting ducks for like these art fairs or whatever. And he was really good at it, and he got very successful and popular at it, but he hated painting ducks. But, you know, that's the thing he ends up getting known as, and that's the thing he ended up chasing, because he was like, well, I gotta pay my bills. That's what I'm going to be doing.
Right.
You either have to like peace with it and be like, this is the thing I'm going to do for bills, and then I'm going to have my own thing for myself, or you have to say that's not going to work. I need it to be the thing that I want it to speak to me, because I any other way, I think it'll just eat you up inside, and it's doomed for failure.
Yeah, and I think like there's always kind of a middle stage that a lot of people go through in their careers, where they are doing some kind of client work that they're not super into, and putting that in their portfolio, because they're still at the point where like having a list of clients is like important to them, to show that like other people trusted me to be hired for something, so you prospective client should also trust me. But I always advise people not to include that kind of work in their portfolio, the work that you're just doing to pay the bills and that you don't really love, because you're just going to get hired for more of that work if that's what you put in your portfolio. It's better to have like nothing but personal pieces in your portfolio than it is to show stuff that you got paid for that you don't want more work doing.
Yeah, the board games, I've done one board game and one RPG, and none of that work is in my portfolio, because the board game was fun, but I didn't enjoy drawing. That was my first time using reference to do people, because I did people on the cover, and I was like, it's also I should have said no, but I was like so excited to get a board game job. I was like, I'll do it. And then I was like, I don't know how to draw people. This is going to stress me out, you know?
Is it the one with the 2 scientists? With the gate? I like that piece a lot, actually.
It turned out great, mainly because I'm lucky enough to have other artist friends who looked it over and were like, here's all this shit you did wrong. And then also another one of the artists who helped me coached me real quick on shooting proper So 2 people on those cover are myself and my wife, because I don't have models here, and I was like, I gotta shoot reference. So my wife is a psychologist, so she's a doctor, and she has lab coats. I'm like, grab those lab coats. We're scientists now. And then I set up the camera and did all that. But even then, it was like I was so stressed doing that project. I was like, I never want to do a cover like this again. So like now when board game companies reach out to me, I say specifically, what kind of work are you looking for? And when they say we're looking to have like 5 people on the cover, I'm like, no, because I probably could shoot the right ref.
Battle scene with horses.
Well, like Andrew knows about one. Yeah, exactly. It's 5 dudes and 6 horses. Let's go. Andrew helped me try to negotiate a contract for. Remember, they want to do like space people on the cover, and I was very hesitant about the job because I was like, I don't really draw a lot of people. Like, characters that I draw in my series are wild looking characters. I'm comfortable drawing that way. But if you wanted to look like real life people, that's not my comfort zone at all. So I've said no to a couple jobs the last couple months because I'm just like, no, I don't want to stress myself out,
It's a good skill to have.
It feels scary because you're like, because we talked about this before, Andrew. It feels scary because you're always like, are they going to ever call me back?
Is that the last time or whatever? Yeah.
You got to be willing to just be like, maybe maybe not, man. Like,
yeah, whenever there's a moment like that, it's a good thing to say like, this isn't something that I do. If you ever need this other kind of thing, feel free to contact me.
Yep, that's basically what I've been doing.
Yeah, because it's not closing the door. It's just saying like, oh, like this doesn't work for me right now, but I'm always willing to work with you.
Yeah, basically, and what I ended up saying to the last company, I was like, I really enjoyed doing that first cover for you guys, but this cover's the undertaking. Plus, there was a talk about negotiating costs, but that's a whole different story. I forgot what I was going to ask you. I was going to, so one of the things we also discuss on the show normally are artists' hobbies, right? Because I feel like you don't sit around drawing all day and sleeping and then getting back to work. There's other things that you enjoy doing. I meant to reach out to you beforehand and ask you what your hobbies are, but now I'm just going to ask you live. On the
I play bass, and
no way.
But my partner plays guitar, and we've got a drum machine, and we jam out in the basement in the evenings.
Oh my god, are you guys starting a band?
Oh, nice.
Sort of.
That would be fun.
I mean, we right now mainly what we do is we make up songs where I'm very unschooled at the bass. I'm mostly learning it by ear because I want to be a weird bass player. So I'm learning it by ear and adding technical things as I go, as I meet frustrations, and then have Tony explain to me like, here's like the proper way that people do that thing. So but yeah, I'll usually like make up a bass line, and then he'll make a little drum machine loop to go with it, and then figure out chords that'll work with the notes that I'm playing, and we'll make a little song. So
he's on. You said he does guitar?
Yeah, he plays guitar.
Is he learning guitar, or does he actually play?
No, he's very good.
Okay.
I mean, he's continuing to improve. But the fun thing with guitar is that, or with music is just that it's something that you can improve at, the same as art. It's expressive, but it's a totally different kind of expression than visual. So
yeah, I mean, that is a hobby I have too. I'm like you. I learned from a punk guitarist, so I learned power chords first, but then now I tinker. So all my songs are power chords.
I love everything punk, especially like starting to learn an instrument. Like when I was in high school, I had music classes. I was in orchestra. I played violin.
I love violin.
The impression that they give you at school is always that if you're not good at it, you should give up because you're never going to make a living at it.
Yeah.
So like, you have to just be somehow naturally good, or have had your parents start you off at it when you were 4, or you won't be successful at it. So there's no point in playing music. There's never a moment where my high school music teacher was like, you're supposed to be expressing an emotion, and you can make something up on an instrument. You don't have to play the things that we give you. It's like they don't teach you like the the expressive side of things where it's okay for it to be imperfect and like wild and crazy.
Yep.
But then like finding out about punk music as an adult and like I think there's a Slits record where it has like the fingering for 4 different power chords like on the actual record sleeve, and it says, "Now go start a band."
Oh wait, which band is this?
I think it was the Slits.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is a great all-girl punk group that they did a really fantastic cover of "Heard It Through the Grapevine," which is the one thing that I was trying to learn the other night, and I scraped all the skin off of my middle finger, like using it to mute the string at just the right time. It's so fun.
The callus that you build up when you play are one of those things that people, they're like, because like, you know, my left hand has all the callus on it, my right hand's fine, you know.
Yeah, I've got one here, which is kind of a weird place for one, but it's where the frets hit my finger as I'm sliding my hand up and down the neck.
On the bass. I tried playing bass once. My hands are not big enough for bass, but now that.
Oh yeah, you could get a short scale. I play on a violin bass, which is like shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few different styles. There's a few different makers of shorter scale basses. Like the Mustang bass is a really famous.
That sounds like a cool. Yeah, bass was like, you know. So the guy who taught me was he was in punk, or he was in Screeching Weasels. He was the first bassist for Screeching Weasels, if you know that band. But then he was in a bunch of like punk bands, and then he was in a bunch of like, I guess you call them like metal punk bands. They toured with like the Pumpkins and stuff. So when I first met him, I was like, oh wow, you're cool, you know. And then I was like 18 or 19 years old, and he was like, I was like, I'm thinking about taking guitar lessons. He's like, I can teach you. I'm like, but you're a bassist. And he's like, I play guitar too. And then so I started learning from him initially until he decided that I should go learn what he calls big boy chords, which are full chords, you know, like versus the power chords. So he's like, it's time for you to go learn some big boy chords. And he's like, I'm not the guy to teach you those though. So I went to, there's a school here in Chicago called the Old Town School of Music. And that's when I learned what you're saying, just experiment, right? Because you're not playing, you can learn all the chords and then you just put them together any which way you want until you start hearing like a song in your head. So like when I play guitar and my kid's hanging around with me, I will randomly play music for her and she'll start singing, which is great because that's what my wife does too, right? Just sings random songs. Yeah. I'm just like, go for it, kid. And I could play something wrong. They don't know the difference, right? You just keep going with the flow. She definitely does not like the electric guitar. She plays with the amp, and I plugged in the electric one day to be like, check it out. Here's what it does. It scared the bejesus out of her. I don't think she expected sound to come out of it, you know? So I haven't got an orange amp, so it's very grungy. Because, like, again, punk guitar is what I want to play. So she didn't like that sound. She's like, no, don't like that sound. I'm like, you better get used to the sound. The thing is, she listens to punk music with me. So I thought, this is the same sound you're hearing all the time. Now you're hearing it live. So I would like for her to listen to some of the older punk bands, but some of those lyrics don't want her singing them. Like the Misfits, you know?
Yeah.
Like I love the Misfits, but those lyrics are harsh, boy, you know? So, okay, so that's cool. That's a good hobby. That's, you know, like I think I have too many hobbies is my problem. I had to dwindle them down to specifics, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I have others too. Like I'm obsessed with fashion, and but I haven't brought my sewing machine over to the new house yet.
You're gonna make your own clothing?
I have made my own clothing ever since high school. I don't have anything that I wear right now, except for I have a full costume that I made for Carnivale in Venice. And that's really, really fun.
You had a cool suit on at AluxCon that I was like, I wish I owned a pink suit. That's cool.
I did not make that one, but I do love looking for really good suits. Suits are one of the things that would be incredibly difficult.
Dude, I had this
neighbor who was a tailor who showed me like all the different layers of fabric that blazer. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. He had to do like a medieval style apprenticeship.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, tailoring is like a old profession.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, my cousin only gets tailored suits because he was saying how like he used to buy like we used to always just go to like the Express and buy suits from there because they look good on us.
Yep.
Because Indians are weird like that. But my cousin one time got a tailored suit made. He said this is the best suit I ever owned. You know, because it's perfect.
I just got a tailored one too, and man, I love it. It looks so good.
I mean, he owns like 5
Makes
now.
Such a difference.
They're expensive,
really
man.
does. Yeah, they are expensive.
There was a guy in my old condo when I used to live in the high rise who had a unit in there. It was just he was a tailor. So one unit was all his suits and dresses and whatever he tailored, and then the other units where he lived with his family. And I asked him once about getting a tailor-made suit done, and it was like $1,000. And I was like, I don't wear that many suits, right? I'm not like what's his name, Barney Stinson, you know, running around with a suit on each day of my life. So it's like, do I want to spend $1,000 for a suit I'll wear once a year? You know, maybe. Do I want to change to a suit wardrobe every day? Absolutely not. You know, like.
Yeah, I mean, I love wearing suits enough that I knew that yes, I would wear the suit components as individual pieces or things too. Like I love wearing the blazer with jeans and stuff like that.
I think it's cool that you make your own stuff because it's very unique that way when you show up to an event. Because like, you know, sometimes it's very rare that I've been to it. I think I've only been to an event maybe once or twice where somebody's had on the same thing I own. It's very, very, very rare because I have a lot of old shirts. But when I do see somebody wearing this, I'm like, crap. You know, like you just zip up real quick. You know, we're not wearing the same thing. You know, that's cool, man. I definitely am not good at sewing. I can't even sew a hole in my kids' clothing. So it's not a skill set I possess. I'm more like, I still like comic books. You know, I read and that's the other thing. I've made time for those hobbies. I was telling some people in the Rusty group a couple weeks back about how you have to make time for those hobbies because I've fallen into this trap of like work, family, zero time for myself. And that time for yourself doesn't mean you take a nap or take a walk. It's like do something that's going to like, that you want to do it. If it's like reading a book, or reading a comic book. I also build Gundams, kit bashing a lot, you know, something, you know, Andrew and I both are into 3D sculpting. My machine's not here yet. So,
soon.
Whatever.
Sooner.
Mini refrigerator's going to show up one day. But, okay. Well, is there anything else you want? Oh, you wanted to talk about, you have a lecture coming up at the end of the week.
Yeah, I do. I have a lecture coming up on this Saturday, the 29th at 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. It's through the Muddy Colors Patreon, but I think like when it's live, it'll be free to watch, and then it'll be available for the patrons to download later.
I'm definitely a patron.
And it's going to be all about the artist's voice and what the visual components of the artist's voice are, and then talking about my own journey with my voice and sharing some things from some artists that I interviewed about their relationship.
That's cool. You definitely have to tune into that. I'll definitely drop a link to that in the messages for the video after we're done. I don't have any other questions. I ran out of questions. Is there anything else specifically you want to talk about? I mean, it's just an open forum at this point.
Yeah. I think we talked about a wide range of things. So I think that
we're good for now.
I think that the emotional side of making artwork is something that I always like when it comes up in a conversation, like when we were talking about thinking about your power zone instead of your comfort zone and things like that. Because your confidence as an artist is one of the things that makes or breaks your career. It's not even like whether you're skilled or not. It's whether you can tell people what you're good at in order to get the work that you're good at and to find your community and find the people that are into the thing that you're doing. So I think it's like a thing that we don't address enough in education, I think, and it's something that I specifically focus on in my classes and my teaching.
I'm definitely going to consider moving my audit. Seriously, I think there's a lot to learn there, and that's maybe we should have you on again one day to talk in more details about that after your. I don't want you to give away your whole lecture. Cool. Well, if everyone watching, if you guys have any questions, now is the chance to ask because we're about 20 minutes over, so I'm gonna call it. Mm-hmm. I'll give them 1 minute to ask a question. If they don't ask, then I'll call it.
Oh my goodness, you're giving them the Jeopardy time.
Giving them a time limit, yeah. Well, there's a lot of people watching, which is cool. Sometimes people watching, they just don't want to ask questions, which is fine. Mm-hmm. I get it. Even though I'm like, please ask questions. It helps you and Andrew and myself out too, because like I said, I just ran out of questions. I try to make a rudimentary amount of questions, but then I'm like, I don't want to pressure anybody.
There is another comic project that I'm working on too.
Tell us.
I'm writing for my partner to draw, and that one is also about a band, but it's a science fiction world.
Oh, I mean,
and it's about a band that is playing in a solar system cruise ship that's like the size of a city and has like a big rock and roll scene. So
that's
there's
cool.
a lot of,
nice.
I didn't realize. I didn't realize Tony draws. I know he's big on photography. I remember that.
Yeah. No, he does magic cards and draws comics and all kinds of stuff. He does awesome. Concept art for video games for his main living right now.
That's cool.
Yeah. The game that he's working on has been announced recently, but I forget what the exact title of it is. It is a Star Trek game, which is awesome because like Star Trek, we're both big Trekkies. So.
You are? I should have you on for. I got Eric Wilkerson joining me to talk about Star Trek.
Oh, nice. Yeah. But yeah, the game is. Let me ask him what the title of it is.
Sure.
Just a second.
He's gonna come in here and sell us on buying the game.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna happen.
It's called Star Trek Resurgence.
Resurgence, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, you can see some stuff online about it. It's been announced.
Oh, that's a good question. So Jonathan said to you, Noni, what's a question Noni wishes she was asked more?
A question I wish I was asked more.
Like maybe something we didn't ask you that you wish we would have asked you. That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is a tough question. I mean, like, I think that the things that always seem to resonate the most with people about my work is that it's so personal, and that is something that we talked about a little bit. But I think like that. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be kind of. People can feel a little bit dicey about talking about like just how personal the things are, and sure. I know like I was telling you a little bit about how my comic has a lot to do with my dad's passing, and like when you start talking about grief, there's like a pretty big sort of taboo about that, and I think like part of working on the project for me was because I was very, very personal with my grief, and I didn't tell almost anyone about my dad passing for more than a year. It wasn't until we finally had his memorial after a year and a half because of COVID. We had to wait. That I posted a memorial about him on Muddy Colors, and I think that those conversations talking about like the really deeply personal side of my artwork is something that I really enjoy talking about it, but it can get intense. So I think that I guess like there's a lot more that we could talk about the deeper side of what goes into my art, especially when you start talking about writing and things. Like I've been writing a lot more, and there's a lot of like that self-therapy stuff that we were talking about in this project and in all of the.
Well, maybe we'll have you on again to do it again, a deep dive, because writing is something I totally spaced on asking about too, because I'm doing my own writing as well.
I would love to come on and talk about writing.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I will round this out now. Thanks everyone who's watching. I don't mean to cut us all short, but we're over, and I don't want to. We have this bad habit of, if we go too far over, sometimes the video just cuts off. Thanks for being on. I appreciate it. I know you're super busy by the sounds of it, so it's awesome.
Thank you for taking your time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love talking art stuff, so it was really fun.
Yeah, which I try to tell the guests is like, we can talk art as long as you want, and then if you've got a hobby, we can talk about hobbies too. Because I'm trying not to be like, let's just talk business the whole time, because I think there's so many other people that do that. It's like I don't want to, But it's interesting because sometimes you do get some different perspectives. Like we did talk business a little bit, but I think all the stuff we said was very important and valuable to anyone who took the time to listen. So, all right, I'm going to take us offline. So give me 1 second. Thanks everyone for watching. Our next guest is, let me tell you, next week it's on the 6th of February, and it'll be Tatiana Dykes, who I met at LuxCon for the first time. She's super chill.
She's great.
So she's going to have a lot to talk about. So, all right, hang on 1 second, guys. Thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it.